Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the BH Futures webinar series. Tonight, we have an opportunity to dive into the world of virtual reality and hear our honorable guest reflect on her own career as a researcher in this domain. Dr. Amela Sadagić holds a PhD degree in computer science from University College London, UK. She is a research associate professor and a co-director of the Center for Additive Manufacturing at the Naval Postgraduate School in Monterey, California. Her research career began in 1987 when she led a team engaged in implementing the PHIGS graphics standard at the Institute for Automatics and Computer Science at the Energo in Sarajevo. She coordinated a number of projects, and the largest one included 40 researchers from 3 institutions: the Naval Postgraduate School, the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, and Sarnoff Corporation. Her research interests include virtual reality, augmented reality, human factors in VR and AR, multi-user collaborative environments, coupling and evaluation of emerging technologies in support of systems for operation, training, and learning, innovation and adoption of additive manufacturing in the naval domain, and diffusion and large-scale adoption of technology. She currently serves as an associate editor for the Frontiers in Virtual Reality industry and for Presence, Virtual and Augmented Reality Journal. To all our viewers, thank you for joining us tonight. Feel free to ask questions in the QA section or the chat, and they will be answered by our speaker after the presentation. Amela, thank you so much for taking the time to be here.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for inviting me. Zdravstvoj, pozdrav. I was approached by Anna a while ago, a couple of months ago, and she told me about a whole series of presentations, discussions, opportunity to spread a good word about different topics, including research, different type of engagements in domains. And I'm very happy to have opportunity to talk to you about virtual reality and my fascination with that world. Things started really for me in high school. All I wanted to do, what I wanted to do is computer graphics. And so started with that, but then continued, proceeded to virtual reality and some other domains. So let me share my screen with you, and let's start with a story about this fascinating domain. Okay. So I hope that I will be shorter than 1 hour so that we have plenty of time for discussion. Feel free to post your questions in chat, and I'm more than happy to answer your questions even midway, so we don't have to wait for the end. I will try to control myself and ask if there are any questions. But again, give me any type of signal that you can, and even by voice, and feel free to do that. And I'm happy to support that type of interaction. So a little bit of a disclaimer. I promised to tell you a story about virtual reality, but of course, time is so short, and this is going to be a bridged story, a shortened story about virtual reality. And as I say, and I'll put as much as we can squeeze in 1 hour. So the domain that I've been working in is so rich with visuals, and I'm more than happy to share some elements of my portfolio, research portfolio. So this is a group of images that illustrate my work, starting with the work that I had at University College London when I was a doctoral student, to the most latest that I'm super proud of work of my students. So I like to start a discussion on any topic with a little bit of definitions, and definitely the questions why we care. And so I think that setting up the stage and solidifying our understanding what that domain is about and why we should care the rest of the story, it's kind of easier to fold into that place. And so when we talk about virtual reality, the key features of that type of technology is 3D, right? So it's three-dimensional, and you have a lot of advantages for that. A level of realism is expected to be high. That is not to say that everything has to be realistic. Sometimes we go for simplified shapes, cartoon-like objects, and they have their own purpose. They really bring sort of playfulness. So the level of realism will highly depend on the domain that you are working on. A real-time aspect. So this is type of a situation when you have to run everything in real time. So there's very little anything that is pre-recorded. If you think about 3D movies and brilliance of final product that they have, all of that is pre-recorded. So they can spend a ton of time crunching the data, providing beautiful images, everything smooth and nice, but they record it and then play it back for our pleasure. VR doesn't have that luxury. So everything that you present has to be with a frame rate, these days is 60 frames a second or more. And then another thing is interactivity. So things have to be interactive. I need to be able to grab some objects, move them around, create new objects, but also interact with other people. And so when we talk about virtual reality, it's a system technology. It's a whole system that's involved. We typically forget that human users are part of that system. Right. So when we talk about virtual reality, we have to include human users as well. And so virtual environments, this is my definition, totality of different sensory information. So this is first time when we start putting not only visual, but audio, haptic, smell. And there are some situations when people bring simulators for taste. As well. However, I'm a small person in terms of my contribution to VR domain, and giants of this domain provided definition that we subscribe to. And so Dr. Fred Brooks, who happened to be my mentor while I was at Chapel Hill, suggested to community during one of the conferences that when we talk about immersive virtual reality, we have in mind 4 ingredients: real immersion. So world is life size. And so it's one-to-one. The size of the object is as you would expect them in real life. And the reason why that's important, because that's a premise of being realistic, right? It turns out that humans behave very differently when everything is the size of that they expect. So seeing tiny human and human of normal size provides different reactions from users. So world is life size, the rest is blocked out. So that's a quite stringent demand. So you would expect that I will not be able to see any portion or feel or smell any portion of a real world. So all that is blocked out. All I can see is simulated world. We have a little bit of a relaxation of that element. As you know, there are desktop VRs. And in desktop VR, I see screen, but I can see obviously with my peripheral vision beyond the screen. So that's a relaxation that we still have, but nevertheless, we are talking about kind of firm definition, majority of VR solutions. Then it's a real time. Viewpoint changes as your head moves, and the changes that we are talking about are 6 degrees of freedom. So not only that I can move my head in position, but in orientation as well. Real space, the worlds are 3-dimensional. They can obviously be simulation of concrete worlds, but also abstract worlds that don't exist at all. And then real interaction. You are able to manipulate virtual objects. And so given this definition, one, what I would like to do is to bring in this context 360 videos, because very often they are advertised as virtual reality. And so, as you know, 360 videos, beautiful technology. I love it. In many, many cases, what you really, really need to do is how things were recorded in real life, real environment. One of my favorite 360 videos is a video of Blue Angels. So they had a camera on one of the aircrafts, and that is a viewpoint from which you start to appreciate level of precision and level of collaboration, where I think distance between two wings is less than a meter. And so, so there's nothing that would describe and give you level of appreciation for that type of situation. So 360 videos, wonderful, excellent technology. They are not VR. In a stricter sense, they are not VR. They are not 3D, right? So I cannot really manipulate with those objects. The only viewpoint that I can have is a viewpoint of the camera. I can move, rotate that viewpoint, but that's about it. So that's 3 degrees of freedom. And again, being that our world is not three-dimensional in terms of its existence, it's just a flat video that is nicely stitched, so you can look all around. There's no interaction with the object. So again, just a little bit of clarification. Industry advertises 360 videos as virtual reality. In technically, strictly speaking, they are not. But again, what qualifies virtual reality as the best? What you are looking for at every single point is best match in terms of technology that you're using for particular purpose. And so in some cases, 360 videos will be superior than virtual reality, and the opposite. I wanted to make sure that we situate virtual reality on reality virtuality continuum. You may have met with another term, virtuality and continuum, whatever. The same group of authors published 2 papers, so they have 2 different names. But anyway, on one end, we have a real environment, so everything is real. I can touch, I can grab, I see everything with my senses, and nothing gets inside between my sensory system and the real world. And then you start bringing simulated elements. So augmented reality, the majority of my visual field of view or auditory field of view, that's also takes in a context of augmented reality. I can hear simulated sounds as well, right? So it's not only video, it's all senses. So majority is real world, only small portion is simulated. And then we are moving more where a smaller portion is real world, majority is simulated world, to the point, and that's augmented virtuality, to the point when everything is simulated. And that's where you have virtual environments. So virtual environment, as I said, is complete opposite of a real environment. Ideally, what you would like to do is not only to have a visual information simulated, but also auditory, haptic. So everything that should be presented to your senses that corresponds to what you see. So there is kind of good match of what you see, what you hear, what you feel. So that was, anyone having any question on definition or discussion?
No one posted any questions yet.
Okay, all right. We can maybe discuss it later on. And so the next question that topic that I wanted to cover is why we care. Why do we study virtual environments? And the reason why that's happening is because they have absolutely compelling impact on the users. Written word is valuable, and when you read a book, you feel as if you are part of narrative or part of environment that you imagine in your head. And then when you have pictures, plus pictures that are moving and images that are moving, and then reacting to you, it's even more compelling. The good designers will make sure that interface is so easy that you spend minimum time learning how to operate in that environment. And so the goal is to engage people in most intuitive way. And so when we say, I can move, I can navigate through virtual environment, in some cases, navigate means walking. And so as long as you are tracked in some environment, you can walk. It's the same. So zero effort to learn how I advance, how I move in 3D environment. There are also powerful interaction channels. You are no longer passive observers. Sometimes you would like to be passive observers. I like watching movies, and you are just a recipient. There is not much that you are, in terms of interaction. But in this case, you can. You have channels for interaction. And then they enable creation process. And when we think about learning science and the way people learn, this type of system supports constructivist approach to learning. So I'm learning by doing, right? So that would be one way. And that's extremely powerful, not only for K-12, kids in primary and secondary schools, but for adults learning, training. That's the essence. Be able to do something as close as the way you do it in real life. And that's, it would be, it's a good place to bring a note that the condition for using VR for training, for example, is that we react to the sensory stimuli in VR the same way that we react in real world. And so if that is all the same, then there is, we can make a case for training in VR rather than doing it in real world. And so why would we do that? Why, what's the power that virtual environments brings? And, in particularly, I here reflect on learning and training. They have a potential. And what I mean by potential is there's no absolute guarantees, right? You can have perfect system, but the way you do it may be inappropriate. You lack good pedagogies, for example. And so system was great, the way you do it wasn't, and so you didn't get the effect that you wanted. So there are quite a few things to tweak and think about. So again, they have a potential to do things more effectively. So you can learn faster, better, cheaper. You may have better skill retention than some other ways of learning and training. They also increase interest and motivation with users. And of course, motivated learner is the best learner that you can possibly have. And that is precondition for better performance. They also offer opportunities to do things that are not possible in any other way. And usual example that we give is, flight simulators. You recreate situation when pilots can practice emergency procedures in a safe way. And so you don't ask pilot to shut down the engine midway in air and say, now figure it out. What's the emergency procedure that you should apply in this case? You do it safely in flight simulators. The other way is you have some surgical procedures that are super rare, and often you practice it in simulators, and one in so much you may have opportunity to do it realistically. And so they support situations that are not possible in any other way. And the last one I always like to add, it's responding to expectations of contemporary audience. I was lucky to work with a number of domain users. Some of them included what's called here K-12, so kindergarten to grade 12, meaning, you know, closing to including high school, I guess. And so what we realized very quickly is that, and we know that it's just a fact all over the world, is that tools that kids are using in after school hours is far more advanced. And I'm talking about, you know, one portion of the world. I don't make assumptions that, you know, kids in poorer places, you know, have that luxury. But, you know, in places that those economic situations exist, even there, devices that they use after schools are, you know, far more advanced. And I'm sure that if you are parents, chances are that your kid has a smartphone these days, right? And so they connect. They started connecting their real life and real activity for hours after school. They're passionate about those tools. They have certain level of expertise. You know, start with the fact that every single one of us is system administrator on a smartphone. And so we are the ones tweaking and downloading, uploading content, making decisions. And when could you possibly imagine a situation like that? And so this type of expertise could certainly, and passion, it would be wonderful to bring it to working hours, you know, the way they learn and do things in schools, in workplaces. And I'm in Navy school, you know, DoD is notorious by having old-fashioned tools in the workplaces. And that has some advantages, but also has disadvantages as well. So again, you know, those are elements that I associate always with the value that virtual environments, virtual reality brings. And as I said, they have potential. There is no absolute guarantees. I had recently reviewed some paper and they said it's cheaper. Well, it's not. Often it's more expensive, and it may be seen as more expensive at the beginning, but long term it pays off, right? So how did everything started? So now that we solidified definition and rationale why we care about those environments, where can we find first suggestions of virtual environments? And so the humans, for, you know, forever, I guess, had a desire to surround themselves with images depicting something that was not part of their immediate world at that time, at that situation, that moment, but bring elements of real world for their enjoyment. And so, you know, Paleolithic cave paintings of bisons and so on are one ways of earliest examples of bringing, simulating outside world for your enjoyment at that point. And that continued. Certainly Roman frescoes are another example. And I always say that those are caves that have one frame forever, right? You know, these days we talk about 60 frames, 90 frames a second. Well, this one is one frame forever. Beautiful frame, right? Notice the life size. So the figures of animals, figures of humans, the life size. And again, you know, we see that type of representation even in art expressions, and Claude Monet, beautiful water lilies, entire 8 oil and canvas murals that were displayed, that are still displayed in 2 oval rooms. And even they build even entire rooms to make sure there are no corners, and they can put them in such way that if you are sitting on this bench, all what you see, your visual field of view, is largely filled with this beautiful scene, and you feel as if you are there. And this is just example of modern cave. The cave stands for Cave Automatic Virtual Environments. And so what happens there is that you have projectors that project images all over. So there are 6 wall caves that we have quite a few places around the world have. I remember visiting colleagues in Sweden and in Stockholm. They showed us cave, 6 wall cave, and they underneath on a floor, you stand on a plexiglass that is semi-transparent kind of, and so there's a projector with a mirror that is projecting images. So just like in this case, you see images underneath, and when you enter it, they give you slippers, so so that you don't damage that plexiglass that they have. It's quite pricey. And they told me that week or so before their king came and visited that place. So I was joking and saying that maybe I'm walking in the slippers of their king. Who knows? I'm sure he was given slippers as well. Anyway, just a small joke. But again, those environments are extremely powerful, and having something where field of view is truly 360 all over is fascinating. Oil industry, car industry are the biggest users of caves, and so car industry, again, talking about life size, you need huge display to have a entire car fitting, kind of simulated, obviously, car. And in their cases, they bring several people inside a cave. Obviously, only one person is tracked, but if they stay close enough, they all can enjoy good, correct information, visual information. So again, powerful display solutions that really, at the end of the day, reflect what we had for a long, long time. Another element of the history that I wanted to introduce is Sensorama, that was constructed, patented in '62 by Morton Healing. And so while this was not computer driven, there was no computer that powered everything. They had film played inside. The reason why I bring it, because this was the first time they had several sensory information put together. And so not only that they had, the reason why they say 3D is that a person could see stereo. So it's not really true 3D, just stereoscopic view of 2D information. Wide vision, they brought motion, so the seat could move and vibrate. They had stereo sound, they had smell, they had environment cues, winds, and vibrations. And so everything put together. So a couple of simulation that they had, motorcycle is shown here, and you sit on that seat, but you have impression as if you are on a motorcycle on a busy street. And even smells, they would from time to time bring puff the smell of exhaust, I guess, from the cars. So visuals, sound, vibration, smell, and environment cues put all together. So that was truly multisensory experience. As I said, not computer driven, but very important to bringing the elements of what future brings to this domain. Ivan Sutherland is considered as, there are quite a few people that are called fathers, no mothers so far, fathers of virtual reality, virtual environments. But Ivan Sutherland was really the first one to to put a vision for entire domain. And at that point in 65, there was no term virtual reality. That will come in mid-80s. But nevertheless, here's what he, in a very short paper, talk that he gave during some conference. He said that, and I'll read for you, the ultimate display would, of course, be a room within which the computer can control the existence of the matter. A chair displayed in such a room would be good enough to sit in. Handcuffs displayed in such a room would be confining, and a bullet displayed in such a room would be fatal. With appropriate programming, such display would literally be the wonderland into which Alice walked. Some of those elements are more metaphorical. I hope that he didn't really have and set as a task to have a bullet that would be fatal, because that may not be, the best option. But you get the gist of the level of realism that he is putting as a vision and challenging people working in computer science and other domains, because this is an interdisciplinary domain. Challenge for people working there. How I should see, what should be my perception of environments that I inhabit in that case. So it's quite a tall order. We are not there yet. We are far from there, but we are edging closing to that. The work of Ivan Sutherland didn't stop in just providing vision. He also led a team that developed first head-mounted display that was driven by a computer graphics system. So this is the first time when we start having headsets driven by computer. And this part of the display hanging from the ceiling was called a sword of Damocles. Often literature suggests that entire headset was called that way, but it's not. It's just really just on this part. So tracking was mechanical, and headset was so heavy that it had to be suspended from the ceiling. When I started working in VR mid-90s, we had a headset, and it was 4.5 kilograms. So fast forward here, today when it's less than half a kilogram, it's quite an advancement. And when you wore something that's that heavy on your head, we even had to restrict ourselves and our studies to maximum 20 minutes use. Experienced users, us working with those devices could endure more, but you cannot expect that from your subjects in studies. So that was the first one. Not only that researchers worked in working on visual information, but they also worked on haptic sensation, supporting haptics. And so colleagues from UNC Chapel Hill worked on nanomanipulator, the way with a device that you could experience a world at nanoscale. So obviously it's a zoomed up, and you have you can experience the ridges and valleys of that world. To bring worlds to proportion where you can do that. This is also the time when raster graphics progressed as a field. And when you think about any domain, there is no, the domain doesn't flourish on its own. It's often contribution of successes in many technologies that support it. Good example that I always give is video conferencing. So video conferencing exists for a number of years, decades. So there's nothing new to it. So what's new and why we see such a explosion of and proliferation of video conferencing in all kinds of platforms, starting with your smartphone, is that we have several things coming to fruition. We finally have devices that are inexpensive or fairly inexpensive, so individuals can own them. You have personal computers, you have smartphones, so this is my personal device. You have wireless networking supported, so you have enough bandwidth to pump a large number of data in real-time fashion, and so you can do that as well. Displays are perfected, so you have high resolution display solutions, good contrast, and quality of images is great. We have cameras that are small and excellent in their quality. Again, resolution and frame rate that they can capture and convey to the rest of the system. You also have interfaces, and interfaces are an important part of adoption. Interfaces being so simple that anyone can do it, or almost everyone, right? That is important part of adoption and diffusion of any technology. So when you had all those things, not to mention, compression algorithms and so on, a number of other things coming to fruition, and suddenly you have all the technology flourishing and becoming used on such a big rate like video conferencing. The same happened with virtual reality. Silicon graphics machines, computers are, without doubt, were leaders, absolute leaders in this domain a long time ago, and they cost a fortune. But if you wanted to do anything in graphics, you had to have them. Their reign ended when personal graphics and NVIDIA came with powerful graphics cards, and so no longer silicon graphics was the only game in town. So again, but important element of history in computer graphics and virtual reality. NASA Ames was the institution that came up with the first workstation that combined multiple sensory information. They also had data glove with fiber optic cables and sensors. They even had a data suit, so sensors that were equipped and embedded in a suit. So this was a very important development. And NASA, because it's funded by government, those innovations were shared with industry and with academia. And so from then on, you had a flurry of activities working on and perfecting that technology to have a number of new headsets. One of them was iPhone, in pronunciation, same as current iPhone, but very different. So that was a headset that Jaron Lanier and his colleagues in VPL, a virtual programming language company, came up with. And I mentioned Jaron and his company because they were the first to have application, VR application, and they were also first to have a multi-user application, their famous one, Reality Built for Two. They also had expansion work on Data Glove, and Jaron was the person who coined the term virtual reality. I think it was 86, 87, in some during some conference he coined the term, and then stuck the term stuck. Jaron, of course, his company and himself, remarkable contribution to VR. When I came to US, he was a person who hired me from London. So I had absolute privilege, and I couldn't pass that opportunity to work with him. So I just wanted to disclose that. But again, remarkable concepts that he and his company introduced for VR domain, and we still use them. Virtuality Group was a company in UK and they focused on consumer level and arcades, and they were working from 87. I think they're still in existence with different name. You know, they were bought by some other company, and I think they changed what they do now slightly. But what I wanted to emphasize here, you know, how early did they think about some elements that we enjoy and have today. So this type of platform, you will see renditions of this platform, you will see in a number of companies today. So be able, having omnidirectional treadmill, be able to kind of move, to simulate endless space on which you can navigate and do your full locomotion. And then having that safety rail, 3D mouse controller that you have in your hands and interacting with the environment. Again, we tend to forget and give credit to the giants of the past who came up with some wonderful examples of technology and advancements in this domain. And we think that everything that is new or what we value today came yesterday, and it isn't. So I try to inspire myself with works that were done, you know, way in the past. And so this is 87, and 87, just to reflect a little bit on my career, I was working in Energoinvest company, IRCA Institute, Institut za automatiku I računarske nauke, and at the time, I didn't know that we had such a unique opportunity to work on graphics workstation that not many countries go into developing. That, you know, you just buy. Only big companies would develop something from scratch. And but our institute, Energoinvest, wanted to do it not only to have its own graphics workstation, but also to learn, to educate the cadre, educate research engineers, and be able to do more and continue that mission of educating new generations. And several of us, 3 of us actually, worked at Elektrotehnički fakultet. I was teaching assistant for computer graphics course. Interestingly enough, I happened to meet some of my former students here in California. So I could remember them, having them as students in '92, but they did remember me. So anyway, so remarkable time, you know, developing something from scratch, developing a motherboard, graphics board, porting Unix operating system. And I led a small team of colleagues developing fixed graphics standard for that graphics workstation. You know, fortunate development of events, and we all know '92 was a year when the war started, and we just wrapped up work on Prograph 1 and Prograph 2, and that's where that work ended. Quickly moving, in the end of '94, I was able to I was accepted for PhD studies at University College London, and work that I just continued doing work that I was doing in Sarajevo, and that meant developing new algorithms. And at a time, I worked on algorithms that were dealing with 3D visibility problems. So you always have, you know, bigger and bigger scenes, how you manipulate and how you process them so that visibility is resolved quicker and better. And that was a point when my professor, advisor Mel Slater, said, Amela, I know you need some money. You know, you are students, so every single student needs some money. How about you start working on research project with us? And I said, sure, why not? So that was the time, and he was doing a whole array of studies in human factors. To me, that was discovery. And I usually tell to my students that's the time when I discovered people. I mean, people in that type of profession, the technology that I'm working on, I discovered users. And from then on, I was totally hooked. So I left the domain of algorithms, 3D algorithms and everything to dealing with production. All I wanted to do is to work with users, understand how they use that type of environment, how they interact, and how we can improve those environments. And so the lesson number one is, I'll try to convey few lessons. I don't want to preach anyone, but the lessons that I learned is you have to try technology. You can read about it, and so intellectually you have to read, but you will understand to a certain point. You really have to try. So it's very hard to explain somebody how the roses smell if you never smelled the rose. And so you have to try. So use every single opportunity to participate in some demos. If somebody is having studies, be part of those studies, and just explore, experience the technology. Lesson number two is take risks. And seek your development opportunities. I was just finishing my PhD in London, and Jaron came and gave talk to our group and whole university. Actually, we had to rent an entire auditorium. And at the end of the talk, he was talking about National Immersion initiative and this idea of UI in your office and, with special glasses and projection system, you can see your collaborators as if they are in your room. And so he was talking about that system that they are developing in collaboration with several other universities. And I said, I just love what you are doing. And, immediately his comment was, why don't you join us? So don't be shy. Don't flatter. I mean, I try not to flatter somebody if there was no reason, if I didn't feel that way, but I truly felt that way. I was just enamored by that capability. And so, tiny opportunity that he presented developed in what I, continue to have as a career. So I joined them in 99, and the task that they gave me is to lead a central laboratory in company that was funding hold this project, and collaborate with colleagues from UNC Chapel Hill, UPenn, Philadelphia, Brown University, and Naval Postgraduate School. And that's how I got to know my colleagues from MPS. So after the year, and make sure that we put all elements together and we have a demo, finally have a demo, because they have been working for quite a while. And so in 2000, we had the first demo of National Immersion Initiative, where I had on my side, I had 7 cameras capturing images of me. Then they were computer vision algorithms were processing data and generating 3D point cloud. And so that point cloud was transferred from Armonk, New York to UNC in Chapel Hill, so that my colleague could see and kind of move his head and look around and really see me in 3D. And then we also added synthetic elements. So not only that we had kind of 3D representation of the real object, but we also had synthetic elements that didn't exist. So he and I worked on designing his future office space, for example. So lesson number 3 is you will learn, I said I will learn, you and I, all of us, will learn more and faster if you work with others. So not all professions have that opportunity. If you are writing a book, if you are a novelist, it's a painful work. You have to do it, solitary work. You have to do it on your own, and that's how it's done. Most of it. This profession, you are at loss if you always work on your own. You will not challenge yourself. You will not learn from others if you don't work with them. And so I like to work with colleagues from all over our campus. I have colleagues that I'm working with from 8 different departments. And so those are great collaborative opportunities. In every single one, I learned a lot. So, plunge yourself and just go for do team collaboration. That's really, in my experience, that's really the best form of work. And again, I'm trying to wind down our story. I told you a little bit about the past interfaces. Today, we have a whole new array of devices, not heavy, high resolution, high frame rate. We are starting to get 3D audio more often. So not only that we have 3D video, but we have visual information, but audio information as well. So positional audio, you have really good understanding what's the position in space from which audio was emitted. And the haptic devices, we have motion platforms. They become personal, lightweight, and mobile. All factory displays are modular, they are add-on. These days you have devices that clip on your headsets, and so at opportune times they kind of pipe the smells. The smells gets generated, so you can smell as if you are somewhere, you are passing pizza parlor, and you feel the smell of pizza, for example. This is just a list of contemporary VR devices. I'm sure that I hope that you had a chance to try some of them, both VR and AR. Again, lightweight, high resolution, high frame rate. Very importantly, some of them are fairly inexpensive. Not every single one, but some of them are fairly inexpensive, which is, again, one of the conditions to have large-scale adoption, that you have device per user. And those are the scenes that we see these days in games, contemporary VR experiences. Research is using augmented reality to bring some situations to kids, learning about tsunami and floods, and how what they should do, should they proceed in case of floods or smoke in their environment. Training is a big user. A training domain is a big user of virtual reality. Maintenance procedures used everywhere. And so, going through process of repair or checking even before some damage is done can be safely trained in this type of environment. Imagine you made a procedure in power plant. You cannot, because of the safety reasons, you cannot access it always. But in order to practice, to learn, you can safely do that in VR. A little bit on research of some of my students. We had a driver simulator and person who was giving signs on how to drive, because the driver had to navigate through a complicated environment on the ground. So most of the work is still done on visual displays. Most of the user tracking, it is done by optical sensors and computer vision, even though there are some other systems, but it's kind of cheapest, fastest, easiest to integrate with VR system. When it comes to haptics, we use passive haptics. So passive haptic is a prop that you can hold in your hand. It's perfect shape and form, but it's frozen in time. It's actual physical artifact, right? So in this case, there's a wheel it's a driving simulator, and it doesn't change, but it has a shape of the actual wheel, and that's all what you need in that case. When it comes to active haptics, you saw it most likely as a probes, which you kind of poke the world, you touch the world through one point of contact. So that's still predominant form of interaction. And then augmented reality systems, affordable, self-contained. So these days, what we have is a trend of headsets having fully individual computers on its own, computer display and battery put in a one product. And so HoloLens is certainly an example of one. Oculus Quest is in VR example of the same thing. There are a lot of quests, a lot of work to be done, and this is just an example of array of virtual humans that I worked with, starting from mid-90s, when we were super happy to show hundreds of polygons. Fast forward today, presenting, projecting images on physical artifacts, so you have kind of mixed reality situation. Again, demand of doing everything in real time is a heavy one, and demand to be realistic is heavy one. And so I wanted to show you just some examples of how far researchers went in terms of simulating skin and hair, body motion capture. Obviously, we have to track person. Not only head, but in some cases, depending on the situation, limbs, whole head, whole body, face, and eye gaze, right? So it goes that far. You would like to be able to do body animation and also animate clothing. When I move, my virtual clothing has to move realistically. Not only that you will have one person in a virtual environment, but you will have small or large group. When you have large group, there are no chances are you are not going to have human-driven characters. What we are going for is software-driven characters, or agents, as we call them. And so crowd behavior is another line of research that we are doing. A little bit on work of my students and myself. Tangible virtual humans is what I did. But the rest is work of my students. You may want to, if you're interested, you can explore it through my webpage. They, because we are funded by the government, every single thesis, if it's unrestricted distribution, is made available to public and no charge. So that's all free. All papers that I write while working for our university are freely downloadable to everyone. My research agendas, they really fall into larger domain of human performance evaluation in VR and AR. And domains that I'm focusing on is learning, our learning and training. I work with domain users, meaning end users, the actual people who need that type of simulations. And that's the reason why that drove me to come to NPS, because I really wanted to be as close as the domain users as possible. And every single student of ours is a potential user, or they use it in the past. And so study of that type of situation becomes just a little bit more refined, and fidelity is higher. Multi-user virtual environments is something that I continue doing. And the fusion of innovation and large-scale adoption became a passion. When I started working in EnergoInvest, I thought that computer graphics tools were so fantastic and everyone will be using them in, say 5-10 years maximum. Well, it didn't happen in 5 years. It didn't happen in 10 years. And at that time, I had either chance to get the solutions and leave the domain, or say, well, there must be a reason. And what is the reason? So I decided to make a research project after that. And so there are always reasons, and nothing happens, just by accident. So there are reasons why we still don't see large-scale adoption of those tools. And more recently, a colleague of mine got me interested in additive manufacturing, 3D printing. So if VR is bringing elements or transferring elements of real world to virtual world, additive manufacturing does it the opposite way, right? So you have 3D models, and all what you want is to have physical artifacts by the process of 3D printing. So that's the work that I'm doing. And my last lesson suggestion for you is seek your mentors in active way. Don't wait until somebody offers you to be your mentor. Ask them point blank. Have more than one. Have mentors for different domains. Have mentor for professional guidance. Have mentors for how you handle situation in your company or university. And also mentor others. It's not only paying back the efforts that somebody else invested, but you again will put yourself in a position to learn. You learn about other people. You also learn how people understand things that you are working on. You also allow yourselves to fine-tune your message, because I have to while working with my interns, and I had quite a few, these are some pictures, and my students, you really have to get in the head of that person and bring elements of materials to their level, and then obviously, move them on and raise them back. So again, my passion is in user studies, and in the future, I'm trying to convince colleagues working in this domain that we should put far more effort in working with domain end users, that the number of subjects in our studies should be much higher, larger, that we should not do studies that involve 5-10 minutes exposure. After 5 minutes, there's not much one can learn. There's no training that is done in 5 minutes. And so we have to commit to longer exposure, 1 hour or more. Not only in one session, but multiple sessions. And of course, engage all kinds of data collections, including physiological data sets that are collected. So I know I wrapped it up maybe a little bit in a hurry, but I wanted to make sure that we have time for question and answers. And at this point, I'm more than happy to answer your questions. I can stop sharing here.
Thank you so much, Amela. So the first question we got is in Bosnian. I can read it either in Bosnian or translate it for you. Which would you prefer?
Either way is fine.
Okay.
I'll understand. I practice Bosnian every single day. I talk to my family.
The person that asked clarified that you may answer in either language, like they do understand, they just felt more comfortable to ask in Bosnian. So the question is, da li je teško baviti se ovim zanimanjem? Na primjer, ja mislim da sva zanimanja vezana za tehnologiju i slično nisu za mene, ali u 21. stoljeću naprosto smo primorani da znamo o svemu, a ponajviše o tehnologiji.
Right. So, so some level of technology and work with technology is just you have to do it. And as I said, the interfaces are so simplified that everyone or almost everyone can do it. And usually the example that I give is our work with smartphones. And so the progression and the way we create interfaces, the advances in that domain will be even more. So you don't have to be a programmer to work in VR. Remember that I also said that this is interdisciplinary domain, and you have to work with psychologists, you have to work with cognitive scientists, you have to work with artists. And then, of course, we have a number of programmers. So you can connect to that domain easily. It's very hard to think of domain that doesn't have a connection. And so you can carve out the role for yourself. I was talking to my colleague recently, and I said, one reason why VR and games, we were discussing games, are so popular is that they harness the power of narrative. And so 3D environment, if it's just object and there's nothing going on, you don't have a role to play, you just navigate, it's interesting for 5 minutes and then that's it. So what we try to bring is to bring elements of games. And in games, you have strong narrative, something's going on. You have a role to play. There's objective to do. There are often other people who work with you in your team, and there's opposing team sometimes. And so all those elements have to be combined. And so again, you don't have to be technology programmer, but programmer alone would not be able to make a successful, good VR environment or game for that matter. So games are good examples. It's not easy. They're very tough in terms of keeping somebody engrossed and gaming hours for hours on end, day after day. It's really tough. For us, I don't work on games. I work, as I said, on learning and training. So my priority is not to entertain somebody. If they feel entertained, great, because that brings motivation. But that's not my priority. My priority is knowledge and skill acquisition in that case. So to wrap it up, interfaces up, getting simpler, more intuitive, and this is interdisciplinary domain. So if you're not a programmer, there's still a lot of space for you in VR.
The next question is, do shadows casted by objects represent a big technical problem when working in a 3D environment and or VR environment?
Right. So why do we use shadows? It's not only that because we had them in real world. When you have light source, obviously combined with the objects, they cast shadows. We use them as humans. We use to navigate the real world, and so they give us some sense of depth. And you have very important cues, and those are what we call monocular depth cues. So even with my, one eye, you close another, you can have good sense of depth. And so it really depends on application, whether depth perception is crucial for doing some task correctly. And I'm guessing that the reason why you mention shadows is they're costly, right? So again, for real-time system, shadows they cost a lot. So you have more latency if you depend on what kind of algorithm you use to generate shadows. So sometimes what we do often in computer graphics is that we go for good enough. So you don't have to be super perfect, and there are different ways in which shadows can be sort of simulated. So not super realistic, simulated, and for humans, depends on the situation. I wouldn't see the notice. So some of the studies that we do is, is there any difference to naive user if I use one or another type of shadows? And, high fidelity shadows are rarely necessary. Only very few tasks would require them. So, do is, approximate good enough, but they're important cue.
And what would you say are the biggest challenges that virtual reality and augmented reality are facing right now?
So there are the challenges are in a number of domains. So they have challenges with technology, right? So what you would like to do is to have a light, be even lighter. I mentioned that today we have headsets that are less than 0.5 kilogram. You would like to be as light as your glasses. Field of view is something that we would like to expand. We still see, if you are in headsets, you still see those edges, black edges, everything is shut out. So you see that region in video peripheral vision. But you would like to expand it, not only horizontally, but vertically as well. I think the frame rates that we are reaching now, 90 frames per second, possible to be displayed in glasses. That's about it. Humans don't necessarily see the big difference. The processing power is what you are after. So be able to do in real time with that many frames per second in real time, huge scenes with all special effects and including shadows that you said. So that's technology. And then thinking about domain of user studies, I already mentioned challenges. And do studies with larger number of people, with end users. Most of the studies are done with what we say convenience subjects. So those are your university students. But if I need to study something on how surgeons react and how they do, how they perform in virtual environment, I need to have a surgeon. There's no way to train, just casual user on how you go about doing surgery. And so if we don't do that, we are really making our understanding so much poorer, and we shorten ourselves. We really have to work with the domain users, and then expanding those sessions for longer. VR is not used when we talk about learning and training. VR not is used for trivial skills. And if it's something that I can learn in 5 minutes, why would you, go for VR? You just do it on another way. So VR and AR are used for skills and situations that are really difficult or unique in some case. And so having study where they claim, here's how humans learn and the exposure is 15 minutes, I'm always skeptical. And I say, you cannot set that claim, right? What do you know about 15 minutes? Nothing, unless you gave opportunity for somebody to even get tired, get bored. And how would they react? We didn't touch the issue of cyber sickness. And that is certainly important topic, especially if you want to wear those headsets for a longer time. Cyber sickness is connected with mismatch between visual information and vestibular information. So images are coming at you, so to speak, as you move, you point, but your body is saying, no, you are stationary, you are sitting in a chair. And so that mismatch is one cause of cyber sickness. The symptoms are, headache, eye strain, nausea. In extreme cases, people start vomiting. The other reasons for symptoms of cyber sickness are low resolution, low frame rate, high latency, field of view. So there's so much that still need to be perfected in technology to reach that point. And then, there's a whole domain of deployment, adoption of technology. People are tricky. We make everything more complicated, right? And so when it comes to adoption, very few things depend on a technology. I've seen, and we all seen, most perfect technologies fail. For what appears to be no reason on their quality, but again there's reason on adoption, and some of those reasons are you have to have somebody endorsing, advertising. In education, for example, and in DoD, military domain, there is a false misunderstanding on how you promote that type of technologies. There's belief that people will discover goodness and they will choose to do it. Well, think about companies. If companies hoped that you will think their product is good without advertising, they would not make profit. And, we are same people. We react the same way. So, if we don't advertise, if we don't endorse and promote those solutions in learning community, in training community, they are unlikely to be adopted. So again, there are a number of domains in which advances and more work needs to be done.
And on that note, we have a question. In what time frame do you think that VR devices will become widely available for gaming with an accessible price point?
So some could say that that point is reached a good portion of the audience. Again, I don't want to be ignorant, and of course I know that not everyone has a wealth of developed countries, but it really depends what you mean by gaming. Today you can play a game even on a smartphone, and many people already have it. So, and some games. I'm ancient. I remember playing Tetris and being totally hooked, and it was super simple, right? You don't need much of infrastructure. You're not talking about 90 frames per second and so on, special effects. So it really depends on the game. Games can be super simple and yes, engrossing and kind of engaging. And as I said, the advances in any domain happen or flourishing happens because many other technologies, many other segments of society advance, and so I think for me it's hard to pinpoint and say in 5 years, 10 years. I'm sure I would be wrong, and a reason why I would be wrong is also the standards change, right? What we thought it was expensive today is not, and so that moves as well. So it's moving target, as they say. But again, depends what you look for. Even today, some things are inexpensive. Another effort that I want to mention, and it's absolutely dear to my heart, is one laptop per child. And so it's Nicholas Negroponte and his team spearheaded many years ago. I'm trying to remember, maybe like 20 years ago or so. And so their goal is to develop a platform that costs $100 or below, but not more. And so they produced and they distributed those, they are like laptops, and in some cases they even have a crank. So if you don't have electricity, you can crank it, and you can power it for half an hour or 1 hour. And so those laptops are all over the world, and not only that kids use them, but they take them home, and then whole families using. So in that case, we are there, but maybe you are not talking about high tech, VR with headsets and so on. The big push now is really to make VR glasses the same way, the lightweight that we have our glasses.
And a personal question of mine, what I noticed, like this is from a sociological aspect a bit more than a technical one, but what I've noticed is there's been this general idea that once the VR reaches a certain point of development, people might become so immersed that they will actually spend more time in the virtual world versus the real world. What is your personal opinion on that potential issue?
Yeah, there's always that danger, and we saw it with games, even though games that were not necessarily 3D, but you don't. I try to see things in a comprehensive way, and I don't blame technology for technology itself. It's there's a great deal to do with education, how society works, and what type of support people get, opportunities to socialize and so on. So it's more complex. It's again, technology is just technology, take it or leave it. And how we use it, how we educate ourselves is a completely different ballgame.
Okay, well,
but you are right. You are right. There is the danger. Just expand maybe a little bit on that. One lecture that I introduced for quite some time now, and that's kind of end lecture for my students, is ethics in VR. And that's very interesting topic. So we take it from two sides. One is ethics of researcher in VR, and then ethics in VR. And so these days, I'm sure you read some stories about gamers. There was a case when I believe some student in Japan was playing game, and he was robbed of virtual goods. Person was able to track down the culprit and find him in real life and kill him. So those are extremes. But again, what's involvement of researchers is that we create those tools. We provide opportunities for people to be harassed, to be bullied. And I'm not suggesting that those environments should be policed, but if you allow it in a program that you create, you have to think about all possibilities. And so that's our responsibility. I'm not responsible how people behave that way, but I'm responsible because I'm providing tools that will allow or not allow something. And so I don't have final answers, definite answers. But what I want to make sure to plant the seed of thinking about it and being aware of it.
Thank you so much. That will be all questions for tonight. And I would like to read a comment by Marinko Aleksić directed at you. Nisam do sada imao...
Point of disclosure.
Nisam do sada imao iskustvo sa VR naočalama, zbog toga sam veoma zadovoljan predavanjem. Hvala Ameli na detaljnim objašnjenjima, naročito sam zainteresovan za dodatne upute u oblasti obuke pomoraca i obuke pomorskih inženjera, održavanja tehničkih sistema. Pozdrav od školskog kolege Marinka Aleksića.
Yes, hvala Marinko. Ako hoćeš, ja sam uvijek raspoložena da napravim predavanje za publiku koju tu neka vrsta više odgovara. Ovo je bilo za generalnu publiku.
Odgovaralo bi vam da vas kontaktiraju ljudi putem LinkedIna?
Yes, LinkedIn is the best, yeah.
Okay. Well then, thank you so much once again on the behalf of the BH Futures Foundation and the rest of the audience for taking the time, for explaining everything so clearly. It was very immersive.
All right. Well, I enjoyed and hope that I was able to persuade and make some of you and make you a fan, if not enthusiast. And hope to see you in some VR venues, whether those are conferences or demos or talks like this.
Have a great day.
Here.